We got a packed episode this week. Ton of FAQ questions, stuff that you guys have asked me below in the comments. Channel update with a bunch of new stuff coming in, some new video things, and a lot of gear talk. Let's get at it. Metal Base Monday. So first up, I actually want to tell you about next week's Metal Base Monday. Definitely make sure you step in on this one. It's going to contain probably some of the best advice that I could give as a player, and it's going to involve technique, it's going to involve writing, and just overall perspective. It's actually based off of a question I got asked. My man TJ, I bet you thought I forgot you. This one's for you, man. All about you next week. It turned out that once I really thought about it, I thought a whole episode needed to go to this. And what it is I'm going to get into using some of the more advanced techniques like tapping or things like that, things that aren't what you usually think of as a normal bass line, and creating grooves and bass lines with it. I had noticed a lot and had been asked about it that when you see somebody do tapping or any of these more exotic techniques, it always tends to be thought of as a lead idea. And, you know, everybody's waiting for their moment that they can do their wild, flashy bass fill, and that a lot of practice goes into just doing something that you try and shove in somewhere, and a lot of times just leads to overplaying because you want to do it, but it's not part of your regular line. That's not really how it should be. I'm going to cover how to write bass lines using these type of techniques, how to take bass lines maybe you already have and use these, and this is going to apply to people who don't even do tapping or more advanced techniques. It's going to cover how to build a bass line that you're truly going to love, how to view it more from the position of a listener than the performer, so that you know you're always going to be happy with it when you hear it back, how to compose a line from that perspective, and then if you want to use these larger techniques, how to take a solid bass line that's been developed and create it using these techniques rather than trying to use the techniques and then just shoehorn it into a bass line where it's really just not going to fit or it's going to stick out and be awkward. So it's going to cover a lot for people who do use this and don't use these kind of techniques. So definitely catch next week. I'm going to devote the whole episode basically to it. So it's going to be a great back and forth, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your impressions of it afterward. Now, if you don't mind and you will indulge me here, I wanted to do a little bit of gear show off and show some appreciation too. I always try and have some gratitude for the great things that come my way, and I like nerding out on gear. It's kind of what we do here too, so let me have my moment here. Recently got back this bass. I've had this one for a while. It was out of commission for a little bit because I wasn't happy with the bridge that was on it, and just generally wanted to do an overhaul on it. This is really a one-of-a-kind bass. This is a Schecter Hellraiser Extreme, but the difference is it's a 36 scale. There are only 2 of these ever made, and this is the only one in this color. The other was a kind of yellow-green burst that was actually really gorgeous. I think they call it Dragon Burst now. And there were only 2 of them made, and I believe the other one went to, and don't quote me, but I think it did, go to the player and body count. But this is a phenomenal bass. I really like the Hellraiser Extreme series, and so getting one of these and having it in that long extended scale there, it's truly a monster. It sounds phenomenal, and wanted to say thanks to my man Anthony, aka Scummy, at Schecter Guitars, who saw this and told me about it. I had seen it once before at the shop when I visited, and he told me that the deal they had worked out with somebody didn't quite go the way they expected, and they decided to hang on to him and proposed that one of them go to me, which was really cool, and I'm always grateful for what he's done for me. Thanks to the president, Michael, for when that request went past him, approving that and letting me take this awesomeness home. And also a huge thanks to the master, Todd Reich. He does pretty much all my setups at Schecter Guitars and just kills it every time. And he sent it in and got me a great new bridge that's solid as a rock, rewired the whole thing, did a fantastic setup on it. And yeah, I absolutely adore this bass. I'm really glad to have it back. And yeah, so thanks to all three members there, and I really always feel like, when you get something like that that's out of the ordinary, make sure you have that gratitude. So thanks, gentlemen. Absolutely love it. So, with part of this in mind, let's go into question number one. I'm using EMG. I've gone back and forth over, a long period of trying out other pickups and, experimenting here and there, but I always wind up coming back to them. And especially with an option that they have now, and this is going to be talked about in an upcoming video in about a week too, they've come out with variations on the classic P and J pickups that have just absolutely solidified any straying I might need to do on this. Not that I needed to begin with, but they just really have it covered. I go in between two different configurations. On this and most of my really aggressive bass tones, I use a double P setup. These are, the ones I'm using in here are precision pickups inside of a soap bar casing. The other reason I like this is that they're one of the few makers that make a precision inside of a soap bar casing. So I can swap or go back and forth in between different configurations without having to completely reroute a bass or have to switch basses entirely. So a lot of the time I'm using a double P setup. The only version that I change out to sometimes is I go to a P and J setup. The P and J is just a bit more of a change in the mid-centering. It's got a bit more brightness to it and a different focus where it sits in the upper mids. And it kind of goes back to the classic sounds that I came up on, especially ones that were used by like Eddie Jackson, all the classic EMG PJ players. So I like having that for some projects, but especially lower tunings or when I really just want to get aggro and get a really aggressive upper mid presence along with the deeper tone, 2P pickups nails that. So the other reason why I've been sticking with these so hard is that they now have, well, one, the X series, which has the expanded headroom in them, which was kind of my only complaint about the originals, is I wanted to get things to breathe a bit more like you get out of a passive, and they covered it. The last being that now they have the regular PX, the PAX, which is an Alnico magnet, which is a bit warmer and has a throatier sound to it, and then the CSX, which is the ceramic steel combination, which is a little smoother. It has a harder drive behind it, and it's a little more throaty in the mids as well. It's kind of, to me, they go in shades of brightness and aggression from PX to CX, or CSX to PAX. The AX being the most round and grunting to my ear, and the standard X being the original, really aggressive with lots of top-end EMGP sound. I'm going to be doing a shootout in between all three models, doing the P and J setups, the PX, CS, and the AX. I'm going to have that out just here in a few days. I already started filming it, and you'll get a good comparison to be able to hear the differences in between them. But I'll be doing the PJ combination on that. On these other basses, I'm using a P double combination. I alternate on those in between both being the PX or one PX and one PAX. That's the difference. Sometimes I'll put an AX in the front if I want to get a little more grunt and shave off a little bit of highs, give it a warmer, throatier sound, or if the bass in particular seems to be really bright, I'll put the AX up top to kind of compensate for that and keeping it even. But it gives me that kind of versatility with these EMG setups that I can go from bass to bass and I can still have my core sound but have a couple of models to choose from that are just right for that bass rather than having to go to an entirely different pickup or change my sound completely. So that's kind of why I found my home with these things. So that was actually an FAQ. What pickups are you using? Now you know, and they're in this bad boy too. So, Gear Nerd section number 2. The pedals that are usually behind me, but are up front right now, are pretty much the ones that I used to record with and use live, and they're the core of my sound. The main one being The Tech 21 DP3X, the Doug Pinnick signature model. It just fits me really well, and everything I had wanted as far as being able to get that clean lower end and distort my highs, they hit it with this. It's amazingly versatile. I can get a ton of different sounds out of it, and it just has just this gorgeous grind that I can't get out of anything else. So that's really what I've come home to, and if I have to take one pedal out and go live, it's always that one. Now, in front of it is probably my favorite distortion ever, and it's the DSM Noisemaker Subatomic. Surprisingly a MOSFET drive, and it doesn't sound like anything else, and it's this tiny little package that just has so many sounds in it. I did a demo on it, I'll card that up there, but it's surprisingly warm and surprisingly aggressive. The amount of control over the tone as well is just amazing. I mean, you've got not just a tone knob, but switches in between centered, high pass, low pass, different type of filtering combinations, and I use it if I want a super aggressive sound. I'll kick that one on going into the DP and really just push it over the edge, or sometimes I use it as kind of the same way a boost for a guitar player might be on a Marshall. I want to change a little bit of the characteristic of the drive, either warm it up, make the mids a little more throaty, or sometimes just even as a boost where I'll use it to cut most of my low end out to shape how it goes in up front. So if I have, say, a lead break or something where I'm using a lot of tapping, I can get a really bright added distortion thing for a moment. Really versatile drive, and together they make a really cool combination. So in the back, that's why you always see them hooked up. Whatever I'm doing, I've always got those in there somewhere in the mix. What's the difference in between nickel and steel, and why do some strings feel different or have higher or lower tension than others? You can't make complete generalizations, but overall, if you're looking at nickel strings, they tend to have a higher end and a bit more zing on them, but they're a little less in pick attack. I would say a little less grind than you're going to get with stainless steel. They can be incredibly aggressive. A lot of metal players use them. I think Dave Ellefson's using them now. Even Dee Dee Verney, I believe, is using them. So obviously you can get some real clang out of them and everything. But stainless is going to have more of a snarl to it. You're going to hear the pick attack a bit more if you play with a pick, or just the overall cut of the mids is going to be grittier and have a bit more snarl to it. That's the principal difference you're going to get between them. Both of them can get pretty close, depending on how you're dialing in the tone, but overall I find that for pure aggression, nickel doesn't quite get the same place that stainless does. Nickel's bright, it can have aggression, but I almost think of nickel as being clang, and I think of stainless steel as roar. So I realize it's a bit abstract, but that's the difference overall tone-wise. Now, as far as tension, this is where you want to look into the core of the string. A lot of players will get a string and not understand, why does this one feel so different? And if I want a certain tension, what do I need to look for? The two big things you want to look at is what kind of core they are. Generally, you're going to run into two types, round core and hex core. Round core is going to be the less tense and kind of have a lot more give to them. The hex core are going to be much tighter feeling strings. These are the ones that you're going to put on and they're not going to have a lot of give to them. If you want super low action and you don't want a lot of flopping, or you want to be able to tune down a little bit, you probably want to lean hex core, because they're going to be at the same tuning, they're going to be tighter and have less give to them. If you like a bit of back and forth and a little bit more open pull, or you tune up a bit and you want to use lighter strings, but you don't want to have the strings so tight that they're just too much for you, then you lean to round core, and they're going to have a little bit more give, or be able to be tightened up a little bit more without going just almost impossible to get any pull on. Those are the two principal differences in between them. And beyond that, it's just kind of, then you experiment from there. Find out if you like nickel or stainless, that's more your sound, and what type of tension you're after. That's going to cut a lot of options out and focus finding the right string for you pretty quickly. This thing that you generally see a lot of times on my basses, definitely on my guitars, and has my awesome cool logo on it, is called a Jimmy clip. The whole purpose of them is to mute the strings behind the nut, and if you're playing like a stop tail style guitar, to cut out the sympathetic vibrations that would go on after the bridge. It's especially helpful for playing under high gain or with distortion. You'd be amazed how much noise these things actually make, and you don't realize it. If you play with a lot of gain, if you're very compressed in your sound, that kind of thing, this is making noise in the background, and especially when recording, it's much more difficult to get a clean sound and get a good delivery. And that's why a lot of times you'll see studio cuts and things that these guys, all this ridiculous stuff wrapped around the headstock, or foam packed underneath it here. This is easily removable, a little bit more compact, and just kind of fits right up there on the nut, and you can slide it on and off, almost like a kind of a hair clip type of thing. That easy. So I like them. I keep them on, and they've really saved some takes where I'm banging the hell out of something, and these things are just keeping everything pretty tight and that kind of thing. But so now you know what it is. So if you see it on my basses or guitars, you know all kinds of noise was going on, so I made sure these were on it. Cab impulses are, without going into a huge ton of science, basically a pure signal is sent through an amp cabinet and picked up by a microphone, so that the characteristics of that cabinet's speakers and the microphone can be analyzed at the other end, and then that's turned into what's called an impulse file. So when you play through something that loads that impulse file, it then can imitate exactly that setup without actually having to use that setup. You're using digital processing to imitate the sound of a mic'd up cabinet, or whatever kind of chain of speakers you're using. I use them a lot, and then that's my last pedal that's essential on the rig, is I've been using the AMT Virgin Cab. Again, another tiny, insane little piece here, but this is an IR cab loader pedal that they've started to have now. Again, another explanation for it up there. But what I can do is, like, I use a Mesa 412 bass cab. You can maybe kind of see it over there on that side. But I like it to sound a specific way, mic'd a certain way, and the only way I know that they can have it out front live, or that my live sound is going to accurately go in when I record, is I create the signal myself, get it mic'd exactly how I want my end tone to be tailored, then I load it into here, and by playing through, this thing makes it sound identical to that. So in the recording, it sounds like I'm live in the room with my whole rig blasting, and when I send this out to a PA live, I know that the sound the sound man's getting is exactly the sound I want it to sound like, and the one I have on stage. So it's really amazingly useful technology, and this is a very cool little pedal that is able to pack that in there for me. But that's what a cab impulse is, and that's how it's used, and it's really useful technology. If you haven't looked into it, it's definitely worth it, because with things going the way they are, and gear downsizing, and sometimes you don't even get to use your own gear live, having this, you could be using a crappy thing on stage just to hear yourself that's supplied by the club, and you can send out your ultra killer, mic'd up, just perfect setup out to the soundboard, and at least the audience is hearing your crushing setup that is exactly the way you want and the gear you prefer to use. So that's cab impulses. Not if you do it right, and it can actually have great benefits if you really figure out how to make the most out of your practice time. Go back like the last session we talked about and really kind of focusing actual achievements, not just playing through practice, but set goals and be consistent with it. You can actually benefit a lot by playing other instruments and bringing those skills to your bass playing. A lot of people think if they take time off or they go to play guitar or something like that, that their bass playing is going to suffer or the skills won't translate or that type of thing. And it doesn't have to be that way. I know I talked with some of you guys in the comments and actually through email, and some were surprised that on the last album from Voice of Dissent that I put out, that basically I am the band, that I performed everything on it, except for the drums. We'll get into that in the upcoming production stuff and how that was handled. But guitar, bass, and vocals and the writing of the drums were all done by me. And I had to take a good 60 days to really get my chops together enough on guitar to be able to play at the level that I wanted to and to be able to solo better than I thought I should be able to at that point. And my bass playing, I had to, get it a little bit back together. I hadn't been playing fingerstyle for a little bit, but I kept my practicing going fairly consistently through there. And playing guitar, though, gave me some different ways of looking at the instrument, and it also made me look at different configurations and ways of looking at scales and things that I hadn't thought of before. But as far as pure physicality, bass playing is a little bit more physically demanding, but not to a ridiculous degree. I do find if I really would shed bass for a while and really get my hands in shape, when I pick up a guitar, it's just, it's like playing dental floss, ripping across those strings. I almost have to try hard not to bend them out or to just pull them off the neck because they just weigh nothing to you at that point. But the skills do transfer. I actually recommend it, and it can be beneficial to your playing to think in different types of phrasing. So no, it won't hurt. I think if anything, it actually helps. But if you're worried about your chops going down or something like that, go back to the last Metal Bass Monday, kind of examine what's being talked about there, and it's be consistent. If you said, okay, every day I'm going to play a half hour of guitar, then have your goals in mind. Make sure you do them. No just playing and convincing yourself that you practice. And then go back to your bass and go, what things do I need to make sure I stay in shape? Now, it's just like a gym routine. I put out a warm-up exercise and some things to really kind of get your playing fired up in a short period of time. If you kept just that routine going while you were playing more guitar, I guarantee you're not going to slack or really be in any kind of worse shape once you got back to it. You might even be in better shape because you forced yourself just to go to pure exercise while you were dealing with guitar. So there's a lot to be gained, almost zero to be lost, and the skills are transferable. If you're a pick player, even easier. You get that much more out of it. And if you're not a pick player, you never know. You might wind up playing a couple of bass lines with a pick because you've never approached the bass from that angle, and playing guitar gave you some new ideas. So one more challenge for yourself, and nothing to lose except a lot of dumb mental baggage about, hey, if I pick up another instrument, I'm going to lose a muscle or something. Doesn't quite work that way. So I hope all that was informative, and I covered a bunch of questions, and that I will see you guys coming up on the EMG Shootout, on next Metal Bass Monday, on the upcoming production series, and a couple other things I got under wraps. The other platforms I've pretty much nailed down, and it looks like for doing Metal Bass Microscope and some of the things that there's some copyright issues about or things I might be concerned about for this channel, it looks like I'm going to be going to 3 other outlets, so you'll have an option as to which one you enjoy the most and pick to go watch those shows over there. And I think I'm still going to be doing abbreviated versions here and helping people be able to find those shows on other platforms. So that's going to be coming up too. Got a reaction video coming up in a couple of days. That'll be a lot of fun. Hope to see you guys on that one. And that's going to wrap this Metal Bass Monday. Be well, be healthy, be safe. We'll be back on the streets jamming before you know it. I'll see you on the next one.